Good evening, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and welcome you to the presentation tonight. Just a quick couple of things I want to say. At the end of the presentation, we will be opening it up to questions. You do not have to sign up ahead of time or anything like that. We have 2 microphone stands right here. You'll just need to line up. Make sure you speak into the microphones because it is going to be recorded. Anybody that just speaks out in the audience cannot be heard, and so you'll need to make sure that you get in line.
And if somebody's handicapped, we can bring it to them.
Yeah, and if somebody has a difficult time getting to the podium or to the stands, let me know, and I will bring a microphone to you. And then,
No, in fact, let's just thank some folks.
Also wanted to see, we do have some handouts and a copy of the presentation tonight. If anybody did not get that, raise your hand and I'll grab you some. If not, they're on the table up there too, but I'll get to whoever I can real soon. We just wanted to say we have from the assessor's office here tonight, Matthew Arvidsson up top, so you can check with him afterwards if you didn't get any of your questions answered. My name is Julie. I'm with the assessor's office as well. We've got Nancy with PIO who's volunteering her time up there tonight, so thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Nancy.
Also, if you guys do have a question, if you can keep your stories relatively short and get to your question quickly. That way it will allow time for everybody else because we are on a time frame tonight. We have to be out of the parking garage and out of the building by 7:30. So thank you very much. And our El Paso County Assessor.
Thanks, Jules.
Steve Schleiker.
Thank you. Hey, good evening, everybody. And thank you for showing up and taking some personal time to come down and listen to the presentation, speak on behalf, of a very hot topic that we're having not only here in El Paso County in our community, but also here in the state of Colorado, which is short-term rental and Airbnb properties. As Julie alluded to, my name is Steve Schleiker. I'm your El Paso County Assessor. Just to share a little bit about myself is I grew up here, grew up at Whitefield High School. I'm an Army brat. The day I graduated Whitefield High School is the day I caught a plane and joined the United States Marine Corps and showed up to Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, California. And at that time, I was standing on the yellow footprints going, what in the world did I get myself into? But as I was in the Marines, I was there for 11 years and was in Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Southern Watch, denied flight, went to Yugoslavia, different places like that. I was with the F-18 squadron and absolutely loved it. Decided to get out after 11 years. I thought I was going to retire, but I met a very wonderful lady who is a teacher here in Colorado Springs and still is. She taught nearly 21 years at Coronado High School and is now the assistant principal up at Palmer Ridge High School. So if anybody's up in Monument, has kids going to Palmer Ridge, Kendra Schleiker, that's my wife. But I decided to get out in 1998, and that is when I walked around downtown and basically saw a job for a position within the assessor's office, and I think the only reason I got that job is because this was before the internet. I actually took the job off the corkboard and I walked into that elected official and applied right then and there. So I don't think there was any competition. But I've been in the office since 1998 and worked my way from the bottom to where I am today, where you all graced me with your vote and voted me in back in 2014 and just got reelected in 2018. So here in El Paso County, you can only serve 2 terms. So this is my second and final term as your county assessor. I do have an undergraduate degree in information technology management and 2 master's degree, and I am a licensed appraiser here in the state of Colorado. So let's go ahead and just get on this because I tell you, I absolutely don't like PowerPoints. I really like the dialogue that we have with myself and you all as property owners. So as Julie alluded to is, here we have some elected officials that are going to be, coming in. Several weeks ago, I reached out to all of our House District representatives and our state senators and asked them to stop in on some of these meet and greets because this is a very important topic, I feel, here in El Paso County. And like I said, there is a lot of conversations going on with these types of properties in the state. So last Thursday, I learned a lot. It was a very good open house that we had on September 5th and a lot of emotion. And so, I'll be doing another meet and greet on this Thursday, and I'm also going to be going down to Fountain. So if you guys got folks that live down there, have friends that are interested in this, I'm going down to Fountain City Hall on September 19th, and I'll be down there from 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. as well. So what are the objectives in the agenda of this meeting? First is to inform about short-term rentals and Airbnbs. The other one is to review current Colorado law on short-term and long-term rentals and current case law, because we actually have current case law regarding short-term rentals, Airbnbs. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Solicit input from elected officials, property owners, stakeholders, and advise property owners and community on the next steps that I see here in El Paso County. So if we could just set up a little bit of ground rules, if you got a cell phone, if you could just put it on vibrate or silence that. And please, let's recognize that each person participating here this evening is here because we all care about our community. Be respectful and be considerate. There's times let's agree to disagree. Hold all questions to the end of the presentation. Provide facts. Be careful not to generalize and be concise in our discussion. Please, no personal attacks. And finally, let's enjoy the meeting and dialogue. What I am hopeful for is everybody in here walks out with far more information than what you walked in with. So here's our outline. First and foremost is talk about what your assessor's roles and responsibilities. So what is my role and responsibility as county assessor? Talking about local and state conversations and rumors that are going on, terminology and definitions in accordance with current Colorado revised statute. Talk about the difference between residential and non-residential property. What are my concerns in converting a property from residential to non-residential? And my plan to move forward in El Paso County and have basically open it up for discussion and questions and dialogue between. So first and foremost is, as your county assessor, I do not work for the city of Colorado Springs, and I do not work for the Board of County Commissioners. I work for the taxpayers of El Paso County. The only thing that the Board of County Commissioners has with my office is setting my budget. That's it. So basically, when it comes to the valuation of, so when it comes basically to the valuation and classification of all exempt and taxable property, that's basically on my staff and myself. So a lot of folks get confused where they sit there and they go, well, the city assessor. I do not work for the city of Colorado Springs, Town of Monument. I work for the citizens of El Paso County. So what is my role? First and foremost, my staff and I work extremely hard on this each and every day. And our role every day is to ensure fair and equitable taxation through fair and equitable valuation. And we'll sit there, and I hope you guys keep this in mind, because I know there's folks that are going to be sitting there talking about land use, permitting, just a lot of a number of things, zoning. Keep in mind, that is not my statutory requirement as the elected assessor, but I do know those folks who are in charge of that. So again, is to ensure fair and equitable taxation through fair and equitable valuation. My responsibilities is to discover, list, classify, and value all taxable and exempt property here in El Paso County. Folks, we got over 300,000 parcels. We are the largest county in the state of Colorado. And as you guys have probably seen, that parcel number is changing daily. Because if you don't know, the state bird just changed recently. You guys aware of that? It's now called the construction crane. So there's a lot. That's the only good joke you're going to get out of me. And that was a pretty bad one. Just a lot of things going on. I have not signed as many plats in my 21 years in the office as I have in the last 2 years. In fact, just this month, and we're in 1 week, a little bit over a week into September, I've already signed 2 plats. And I'm averaging, quite a few plats that are coming in. So that's good. A lot of house building, commercial building, a lot of things going on. But again, my responsibilities is to discover, list, classify, and value all property. So conversations and rumors. Short-term rental Airbnbs. Oh, you do? Oh, sorry, guys. So short had our assessors conference just several weeks ago, summer conference, and this is a major topic of conversation at the Colorado Assessor Association. Talking about How do we value these properties? What is this next step? Where are we going with this? Cities and we're seeing it here in the city of Colorado Springs, Manitou, different municipalities are enforcing ordinances, permitting, and things like that. We've all read about that. So last year, there was a bill introduced at the House, and many of you probably aren't aware of this, but this is the reason why it's very important that we start having these open houses, because there's going to be bills going to be pulled regarding short-term rental Airbnb properties this year. Guaranteed, because I'm already hearing the rumors. Last year, there was a bill pulled, and what they wanted to do was basically look at valuing and classifying Airbnb short-term rentals as non-residential property, which is commercial. The reason why they wanted to do that is because we have seen the reduction in the residential assessment rate due to our Gallagher Amendment, and I'll explain that here in a minute. So what they wanted to do is basically look at that as a source of income to make up for the reduction in the residential assessment rate. Well, that bill did not make it through the House, and it failed. So here's what's going on. Anybody here familiar with the Gallagher Amendment that we voters voted in back in 1982? I see several hands. So if I bore you, I'm sorry. Back in 1982, the state of Colorado was going through a tax revolt. So what was happening is we were in an extremely hot market back in 1982, like what we're seeing today. And the assessment rate on residential and non-residential was 30%. So many property owners could not afford the taxes on the properties, especially our senior citizens. They were voluntarily allowing their homes to go to foreclosure, or they were putting the keys under the mat to let it go to treasurer's tax sale, which was a very sad situation. At that time, Senator Dennis Gallagher, who of course was up at the Capitol, was going, you know what, I'm seeing lobbyists for farm, ranch, agriculture, developers. I'm not seeing anybody up here lobbying on behalf of the single-family residential property owner. So what he introduced is the Gallagher Amendment, which is also known as the 45-55 split. 55% of property taxes paid in are paid in by non-residential property owners, which is commercial vacant land. And that assessment rate was frozen at 29%. 45% paid in by single-family residential property owners. And that assessment rate at that time was also set. However, the bad thing about this is the non-residential rate is fixed. The floating rate to do the 45% is the residential rate. So from 1983 to today, we are now down to 7.15%. So in the last 6 years, we have actually seen 2 reductions in the residential assessment rate. So 2 reappraisals ago, the assessment rate was 7.96%. Then for tax years 2017 and 2018, it dropped down to 7.2%. For tax year 2019 and 2020, it dropped down to 7.15%. So what happens is the Division of Property Taxation, every reappraisal year, requests all the sale data from all 64 county assessors. They review this, and this is what determines what the assessment rate is supposed to do. So this is like a bobber in a lake when you're fishing. So what has happened here is with the very hot market that we're seeing along the Front Range is the assessment rate has gone down to 7.15%. Now, here's the problem that we have. We as voters voted the Gallagher Amendment in 1982. What happened 10 years later in 1992? Tabor. We all voted in the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So when we went through the real estate collapse back in 2008, 9, 10, and 11, so we all lost some value in our homes. What was supposed to happen to that residential assessment rate? It was supposed to come up. However, you can't do that because of Tabor. It is considered a tax increase, and it has to go to the vote of the people. Who would vote for that? So here is what's happening, and this is the reason why this was a very hot topic, is we're seeing this assessment rate continually go down and never can come back up. And what is happening is it's killing our rural communities because they're not seeing the hot market that we're seeing in Arapahoe, Boulder, Douglas County, El Paso County, Pueblo. So they're actually taking budget cuts. So they actually looked at the possibility of taxing, valuing short-term rentals and Airbnbs as non-residential to make up for that loss of revenue. Well, of course, as I mentioned, that bill failed. So, but I will tell you that is probably a bill that will be reintroduced. And, it's going to be very interesting because it's a Again, I'll go into my concerns, and hopefully you guys will understand that. The possible CCI bill, there is discussion I shared with some folks here, is CCI stands for Colorado County Commissioners. They have their own group, like I alluded to. All 64 county assessors belong to the CAA, which is Colorado Assessor Association. So there is a county commissioner down in Gunnison County. And right now, he is considering pulling a bill and getting CCI's backing on short-term rental Airbnbs that specifically states, if you lease or rent out your short-term rental or Airbnb for 60 days or more, not consecutive, 60 days total in a calendar year, you are going to be considered commercial and you should be valued as such. So the concern that I have there as your county assessor is, how in the world, as the county assessor, am I supposed to determine that? You know, when you're sitting there, you basically value this, and each one of these individuals have the right to appeal that classification and that valuation. How am I, as county assessor, supposed to determine that and support that reclassification from residential to non-residential? And I'm not a very big fan of unfunded mandates. So, you know, what we're looking at is, what is that impact going to be on the assessor staff? Are we going to have to hire full-time employees? But I just see that as a very big problem. And a lot of the assessors in the state completely agree. So here are some current terminology and definitions within Colorado Revised Statute. So long-term or extended stay basically states is a property that leases or rents out for 30 days or more. Examples of those types of properties are apartments, duplexes, fourplexes, homes that are rented out for more than 30 days or more, 6-month lease or a year lease, things like that. So short-term stay, well, let me go back. But the assessment rate for long-term rentals is at 7.15%. Short-term stay, by definition today, is property leased or rented out for 30 days or less by the same person or entity, and examples include hotels, motels, bed and breakfast properties, and their assessment rate is 29%. So when you're sitting there looking at the difference of 7.15% to 29%, you're looking at the quadruple of taxes. So here is an example. So if we sit there and we look at a single-family residential property, the market value, let's use $300,000, times 7.15%, their assessed value comes to $21,450. So if you guys ever want to sit there and find out what your estimated taxes are when you get that love letter from me May 1st during a reappraisal year, here's the math. So you take your assessed value times the mill levy in the district you reside in, because we all reside in different districts. My wife and I live in School District 11. Some live in School District 38. Some live in School District 49. You know, School District 3. We all live in different districts and our taxes go to different places. But right now, the average mill levy in El Paso County is 75 mills. So if you take the assessed value times the mill levy, the estimated taxes on that $300,000 property is $1,608. You change that from residential to non-residential, just that change in assessment rate, not value, just the change in assessment rate, we're going from $1,600 to $6,500, a 75% increase. So, what are my concerns? First and foremost, I received a lot of phone calls from folks going, hey Steve, I actually operate one of these and I am not zoned commercial. You cannot value me as commercial. Well, that's not entirely true. Colorado is a value in use state. I have nothing to do with zoning. What does value in use mean is, as of January 1 on our assessment date, what is the use of that property? We value it. So an example is, let's say you own 35 acres of residential agricultural land out east. It's zoned agricultural, but you are not using it for grazing and you're not using it for growing meadow hay or soybean or anything like that. So we do not value it as ag. We value it as residential land. Another great example is, we're all familiar with Colorado Avenue. A lot of those residential properties that have been converted over to businesses, and we see them move in and out quite a bit along Colorado Avenue. Based on their use as of our assessment date, January 1st, we value it. Is it non-res or is it res? How is it being used? And by law, we can only change the use of that property the next following year. So once we determine the use as of January 1, we cannot change it to the next following year. So Colorado is a value and use state. We do not go by zoning. HOA, covenants, county, and city zoning. There are some concerns there. There's some HOAs that may be inactive or active that are not aware. Some of these short-term rentals, Airbnbs, might be in violation of the HOA or covenants. I will share with you guys is I have received a couple phone calls from property owners in neighborhoods that are not for short-term rentals and Airbnbs, and they are doing research and they're pulling historical covenants and trying to reenact the HOA to basically try to limit the number of short-term rentals or Airbnbs coming into these neighborhoods. So, there is discussion of neighbors doing that. Knowledge of business owners and stakeholders, because again, I am so glad to see a lot of you all here, because I feel a lot of these property owners or neighbors that are living next door to short-term rentals, Airbnbs, just don't have the knowledge and understand the difference between residential, non-residential, what are the impacts. And so that is why I'm doing these open houses, is first and foremost to educate and actually have a good dialogue. Another one is issue with lenders. So a big concern I have is when we all closed on a house, we all signed an affidavit saying that we're going to be using this property as our primary single-family residential property. And the concern I have is we live in a very unique community, and we have a lot of active duty military, we have a lot of retirees, veterans, and a lot of these folks get a loan through the VA. The VA does not loan on commercial property. The concern I have is folks that are going to be, some of these military members that are sent overseas, military members that they basically get transferred for 3 years, but they're using this property. They want to retire in it, but right now they're turning it over to a property manager. They could be using it as a short-term rental Airbnb to pay the mortgage on it. Would the lender call the note? So once the lender identifies this as a non-residential property, which they would because they will see that change in taxes, would the lender call the note? So that is a concern that I have as well. Increased utility rates. So once the property goes to non-residential, commercial, you're definitely going to see an increase in utilities where it goes to a commercial rate. Homeowners insurance. Do a lot of these property owners understand in regards to the difference between single-family residential homeowners insurance or commercial insurance? And I do know that there's some, short-term renters out there that are doing it the right way and they got the right insurance, but I feel there's probably some out there that aren't doing that. Subject to business personal property tax. Anybody here familiar with the business personal property tax? Not. One, two, I absolutely hate this tax. I actually feel this is double taxation. What this is a tax on the furniture, fixtures, and equipment associated with the business. So if you are operating a short-term rental Airbnb, you're looking at paying a tax on the refrigerator, the stove, the bed, the living room equipment, the hot tub, all this type of stuff. So each year you would have to submit and file a personal property declaration schedule, which is a DS-056. However, if the value, after we use a cost appreciation model on it, if the value comes in at $7,700 of depreciated value, you're exempt. We don't even want to know about it. So this is another thing probably a lot of these property owners are not aware of, is being subject to the business personal property tax. But I will share with you is that El Paso County and the city of Colorado Springs are the only two municipalities in the entire state where El Paso County does not levy against business personal property. So the monies from business personal property, locally assessed and state assessed, that are supposed to come to El Paso County government are given back to those business owners as a tax credit. City of Colorado Springs does the same thing. However, we still have to discover, list, classify, and value personal property because monies do go to the school districts, library district, things like that. But I think that's probably one thing that a lot of property owners are not aware of as well, is when you're operating a non-residential commercial property. Property valuation, Tabor Amendment. So we as voters voted in it, and I know many of us have, know the acronym Tabor, Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Here is a major concern that I have with Tabor. So when Tabor was voted in back in 1992, it had a major change in all 64 county assessors' offices. So when that was enacted, basically what it said is assessors can only value single-family residential properties using the sales market comparison approach. Well, as a licensed appraiser, I use the cost, market, and income approach when valuing property. Well, when Tabor was voted in, cost and income were wiped off the table. We all basically, provide a value to our insurance company, and that's based on what is the replacement cost new. And that's what it is. So the cost approach is completely gone. So today, we have to value all single-family residential properties using the sales market comparison approach. For non-residential, we use the cost, market, and income. Herein lies my concern. Let's say we have a property that's operating as a short-term rental in a neighborhood where the median value of those homes are $250,000. This property owner is making money hand over fist, and we value that property using their income, and I can support a value of $400,000 based on their income. Do you all see the outlier in that? So, right, for single-family residential property, per the Tabor Amendment, we can only use the sales market comparison approach. Now, for commercial and vacant land, we use the cost, market, and income approaches to value property. When looking at converting a property from residential to non-residential, this is where you're sitting here and you basically open up using cost, market, and income. No. No, we're talking about the valuation of your property, not the valuation on your income. So, yeah, and we'll get to questions afterwards. I just want to get through the presentation, we'll open this. But just to simplify it, is when you sit there and you have an income-producing property, you look at income, rate, and value. And so when you're sitting here, determining what the value is, if somebody owning a short-term rental is making a lot of money, and based on the money being made, based on the income being made, we could support a value on that property of $400,000. That property is definitely going to be an outlier in that neighborhood where the median value is $250,000. Vice versa, let's go to the other side of the ruler. Let's say that property really didn't do well. And the property owner's going, I'm operating this as a short-term rental Airbnb, and here was my income. I only made $3,000, and the value only comes in, say, $175,000. So you're looking at an outlier. Herein lies my concern. $400,000 on the high end, $175,000 on the low end based on income. That is information that goes out to the assessor's website, which gets hit 39 million times a year. And when you're looking at outliers like that, and you as a property owner are looking at wanting to maybe sell that property, do you think that's going to limit the number of potential buyers that look at your house? Absolutely. So therein lies some concern as well, is Tabor, when you're looking at cost, market, and income approaches. So also the payment of taxes. I actually went by loss of potential property buyer pool. As I mentioned, I really feel is when you're looking at a property that is non-residential to residential, I feel that government is going to be limiting the number of buyers that are going to be looking at that house, of going, you know what, this is the same floor plan that's being sold for $400,000. They don't know, but they got this one across the street that's being sold for $250,000. Where do you guys think that buyer's going to go? Exactly. And then when you look at the taxes, and when they see the taxes at $6,500 on that property, then across the street it's at $1,600, where do you think that buyer's going to go? Which leads me into the proration of taxes. We've all done that, where we closed on a house. We'll just sit there and say, I came and I bought this young lady's property. She sold it to me in June. And so she's responsible for the taxes from January to June. I'm responsible for the taxes from July till December. But if it's at a non-residential rate and it's $6,800, you think I'm going to pay that? So there's going to be a lot more bargaining between buyer and seller. So it adds another layer of confusion to that process, and I feel it's going to limit the buyer pool on these types of properties. The other thing is my responsibilities. as I mentioned several times, my responsibility is to discover, list, classify, and value all taxable and exempt property here in El Paso County. I will share with you guys, put that into the role I'm responsible for, which is ensuring fair and equitable taxation through fair and equitable valuation. So I've actually had conversations with the city of Colorado Springs when it comes to the valuation of these properties. They're like, Steve, you know what? We're actually making them permitted. We'll give you the list. I'm not the city of Colorado Springs assessor. How am I going to determine ensure fair and equitable assessments throughout all of El Paso County? So, one thing that I've been looking at is how do I find these properties in El Paso County, up the pass, in Monument, in Black Forest, out east, all over the place. So I cannot right now guarantee fair and equitable assessment on these types of properties throughout the entire county. The other thing is the state assessment date is as of January 1, which I mentioned a couple minutes ago. So I can sit there and right now, even though I can't do it, and I'll explain why, but if I were to reclassify these properties from residential to non-residential, and based on the current statute of assessment date of January 1, remember, I explained that on value and use, is if a property owner appealed it and said, Steve, I wasn't using this property as a short-term rental or Airbnb as of January 1. I was actually living in it. By law, by current Colorado statute, I have to convert it back to residential. Even though they can move back in it the week later or the next day, but as of January 1, now you guys are starting to see where things are starting to, it's like, it's a big spider's web. So, impacts, county, city, things like that. I've talked to, both sides. I've talked to groups that are not in favor of short-term rental Airbnbs, and I've talked to groups that are absolutely, they're property owners or in favor of short-term rental Airbnbs. And, and both groups completely understand it would be, an economic impact. A lot of these property owners would probably have to make an informed decision if it was converted to non-residential. Do I change my business model? Do I turn it into a long-term rental, or do I just sell the property? Which then in turn means I'm laying some people off. I got a handyman, I've got cleaners and things like that. Also, I need to consider the impacts on assessor staff. I brought up, unfunded mandates that are possibly coming down, from CCI. If you sit there, lease or rent your property out for 60 days throughout a year. How in the world am I going to determine that? And when I got a staff of 50, and folks, I will tell you, I am so damn proud of the assessor's office. We're the largest in the state. However, I'm the smallest staffed metro county in the entire state. I got 50 full-time employees. Douglas County, Arapahoe have probably a dozen, if not 20 more employees, but we're the largest. So my staff do a lot more. But when you sit there and look at unfunded mandates, there comes a time where you have to go, am I going to have to hire full-time staff to surf the internet all day long to pick up these properties? So, the other thing is, short-term rentals and Airbnbs are currently not in definition. When I sat there and I defined long-term stay, short-term stay, if you guys go back to that slide where it said short-term stay, basically properties of hotel, motel, bed and breakfast meet this definition of short-term stay. And we all can sit there and probably agree based on the business model of short-term rentals and Airbnbs, they fit within the business model of short-term stay. However, they are not defined. And by law, they have to be defined, which is why I feel this is a state matter, not a local matter, and I'll go into that a little bit. The other thing is there's current, as I mentioned, there's current court case out there, and it's O'Neill versus Conejos County. And if you actually would like a copy of this court ruling, just email me. I'll shoot you a copy of it. So back in 2018, Conejos County, basically the assessor down there used a shotgun approach and picked up short-term rentals and Airbnbs. And the reason why I use the analogy of shotgun approach is what she did is picked up the ones she knew. So she didn't, get all of them, that were out there, but she just picked up the ones that she saw on the internet or just word of mouth from neighbors, things like that. However, Mr. O'Neill did not agree with his classification and his valuation, so he appealed his property. So she converted these properties from residential to non-residential. Mr. O'Neill at that time did not agree with that. He appealed the classification and valuation. She denied and basically denied the appeal. He took it to the next level, which is the County Board of Equalization, and he lost at that level. However, as a property owner, you still have appeal rights where you could either go district court, binding arbitration, or Board of Assessment Appeals. This gentleman decided to go to district court. So he took it to district court and he won. So what happened is the court at that time determined that the primary use of that property was for single family, it was for residential use. It was owner occupied for some time of the year, even though he lived down in Arizona. You know, he was one of the, get out of here during the winter time, goes to Arizona during the winter, but he won. And because he basically said, it's a property that I live in a couple months out of the year, but it's an inheritance that I'm going to give to my children, down the road. So the assessor took it to the appeal court. The property owner won at the appellate court. So now we actually have a court of appeal ruling stating is if the primary use is as a residential property, it should be valued as such. So herein lies another problem that we have with it, is currently at the state level, short-term rental Airbnbs are not defined in statute. That is first and foremost what probably needs to happen. And you know what? Let's go beyond short-term rentals Airbnbs. Why don't we talk about tiny homes? Tiny homes are becoming a major thing right now, where who values the tiny home? Is it the assessor? If it's on a trailer, do they plate it? And does the taxes get paid through Department of Motor Vehicles? But these are conversations that I feel that the state is not having, and they're not keeping up with the changing in the dynamics of neighborhoods and our housing. So, but like I said, if you guys want a copy of that case, please shoot me an email and I'll shoot you a copy of it. So, what's the plan to move forward in El Paso County? First and foremost is exactly what we're doing tonight, is educate. Just share with you guys, hey, here's where we're at. Where do we stand today? What is current definition of short-term stay, long-term stay? Why are you not picking these properties up? Why are you, Steve, they're considered commercial. Why are you not moving forward with that? And so hopefully you understand that this is a state matter and they're currently not defined. And we also have a current court case. So this is the reason why I say it's a state matter, not a local matter. I've had several discussions today, not only today, but yesterday as well, with some very nice folks. And the term was, Steve, it sounds like you're passing the buck. You know what, I completely disagree with that. If I was passing the buck, I wouldn't have these open forums, these open discussions. It's the education piece and having the dialogue. But when you're sitting there looking at, feeling this is a state level, not a local level, because it is a law. And I will tell you, is if I were to sit there as assessor and make the decision as your elected assessor to convert these properties today from residential to non-residential, I guarantee you I would lose every one of those appeals. And they would be converted right back because they currently are not defined. You could actually go into Title 32 of Colorado Revised Statute, which is for property taxation. You will find no definition on Airbnb or short-term rental. Or you could go to the Colorado Division of Property Taxation's website. You could Google that. There's manuals in there that are called Assessor's Reference Library, ARLs. Go to ARL Volume 2, Volume 3, which one stands for land, one stands for, general assessor knowledge. And so you pull up Volume 2, pull up Volume 3. At no time when you right-click and you hit find, you type in short-term or Airbnb short-term rental, you will not find a definition. That therein lies the problems. These are the concerns that all 64 county assessors have. In addition to that, is we actually do have a handful of assessors that have attempted to pick these properties up. And many of us, about 80% of us assessors, are extremely concerned because we do not have the backing of statute. And there's actually a court case out there right now that will basically play against our decision to do this. So even the assessors are not being fair and equitable throughout the state of Colorado. And how I found this out is not only through Conejos County, through the court case, but I actually talked to a property owner who brought their notice of value in going, hey, Steve, my taxes are X here in El Paso County. I own a short-term rental, but I own another one down south. Why are my taxes this way? And found out because the assessor down there converted them to non-residential. So even your elected assessors are not even being fair and equitable within the state of Colorado. Therein lies a problem. We're not even, it's a state matter. So we look at proposing 2020 legislation. This is extremely, extremely important. This is why I want to get as many people together, one, educate and get some input from folks, because folks, I've been doing this 21 years. Has anybody ever been to the state capitol? Who here feels that's like a three-ring circus? I do. I'm going, what in the world is going on? But you have to be extremely careful if you propose legislation, because what goes in the front of the meat grinder and what comes out in the back on the sausage packet can be two completely different things. I have seen it happen with the senior homestead exemption. I've seen it happen with the disabled veteran exemption. I have seen it with the classification of agricultural land. You got to be extremely careful, because we're talking about property rights. And you know, the sad thing is I feel a lot of our elected officials up at the Senate and the House are not having these conversations. But I will tell you is, believe it or not, Governor Polis was down here today. And he actually met with our Board of County Commissioners. You'll probably read about it in the paper. You'll probably see it on the news today. And the conversation actually came up regarding short-term rentals, Airbnbs. And so our public information officer, and I think he's here, he may have stepped out, but anyways, he sat there and said, our assessor is actually hosting open houses and having discussions with our property owners and stakeholders on this topic. So I think he was, you know, like, wow, I can't believe you guys are doing this. But what impressed me, though, is he actually gave our PIO his private number, said, I'd be really interested to hear those comments from the property owners up at the state level. Because, guys, this is going to be, there's going to be bills pulled on this upcoming year. Those who know me, I'm extremely proactive, not reactive, which is why I'm starting with the education piece. There's a lot of homework that I need to do as your assessor on these types of properties. But I'm a proactive type of guy. KRDO 13, anybody listen to the podcast or on KRDO 13 live radio? They were so kind to provide me with a podcast with Ted Robertson. So monthly, I go out there and we're going to be talking short-term rental Airbnbs. What are we going to be talking about? Is there new legislation coming down? What, you know, what are we going to be moving forward with? You know, what do we have to worry about? Things like that. So on KRDO 13 under Ted Robertson, we actually have set up a podcast. I'm going to be putting everything on social media. But I feel if a bill comes down, that it's my job to inform the property owner of this. You know, one thing that I don't want to see here in El Paso County, some may disagree, is what's going on up in Denver. And I tell you, Denver really has gotten restrictive in regards to the short-term rentals and Airbnbs, where now, if you own a short-term rental in Denver, it has to be owner-occupied. There's actually a couple that got charged with a felony because they found out they own more than one, and it's not owner-occupied. And there's also a lawyer that got charged with a felony. You guys can Google that up. But what has happened is there's basically about 150, 160 individuals. If you guys want, this is a really good article, Denver Post. It's dated, September 4th, 2019. The title is, "Some Denver Short-Term Rental Owners Are Giving Up Their Licenses Rather Than Risk Criminal Charges." So they gotten pretty strict on that. The other thing that I'm looking for as far as the plan moving forward, step back, review, do our homework. And the other thing is just time out. You know what, we just need to sit there and really look at this. And I feel that the citizens of El Paso County, either for or against, need to have input on this. You know, one thing is I don't like government shoving things down my throat, and many of you probably feel the same way. But I feel, you know, we are a large voice, and because we are the largest county. And I am actually estimating, at least here in El Paso County, is we probably have between 3,000 to 3,500 short-term rentals in El Paso County. Not City of Colorado Springs, county as a whole. That is a lot of properties. And so I feel, you know, we have a very large say in what's going to be happening here in the next year or two. So with that, guys, I'm dry. Holy crud. So I knocked that out in like 45 minutes. So what I would like to do is open it up for discussion and questions. If you guys want to come on down and we can have some dialogue. If you guys
Once again, please be careful when you come down the steps and speak directly into the microphone. We'd appreciate it if nobody in the audience would say or speak out, only because, once again, it is being recorded and those voices will not be picked up. Also, thank you for coming. We had a great turnout and unfortunately ran out of pre-printed slides. So if you'd like a copy of the presentation, grab one of his cards, email him, and we will get that to you.
Yeah, I can definitely email you guys the PowerPoint. And the other thing is, I plan on also putting it up on our Facebook page and also on the website. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Roxanne Seither. I am a short-term rental owner with my husband. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know, I'm gonna squat down a little bit.
Yeah, we move it up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time and for setting these up. One of my biggest questions was, it seems you referenced the law that was pulled, and I was wondering, do you know the people or the representatives who originally pulled that bill or were looking to pass it, or do you know who's involved in the conversation surrounding what's being pulled for this next legislative session?
So to answer your question in regards to the bill that was pulled last year for the Gallagher Amendment, to make that up, I cannot remember who the bill sponsor or who was supporting that bill, but I could actually pull that. You know, we can exchange emails, or if you want to send me an email, I get yours. I could pull a copy of that bill. It's public record, and I could shoot to you actually who was the sponsor and who co-sponsored that bill.
Okay.
And then right now, as far as moving forward with future legislation, the only thing that I've heard is the CCI bill, and that yet has any kind of House or Senate sponsorship, because right now it's a discussion with county commissioners. And so what happens is if the county commissioners collectively vote and say, we support this, then their lobbyists go out and they find a sponsor, you know, a House sponsor or a Senate sponsor and co-sponsors, and they do that. But that's one thing that I'm definitely going to be sharing with everybody. That's what I'm doing here, is just building, you know, contacts.
Okay. Yeah, so what you're saying is it's not quite there yet.
No.
Where there's, okay. And has there been any, I just have one more question. Has there been any discussion on distinguishing between owner-occupied, like what Denver's doing? Because when we went into in good faith with the city, with the ordinance that's already in place, that was the one thing that they decided not to do, was include the owner-occupied provision. And I suppose with the taxation and that concern is, if my husband and I and our family, we ever decide to move, and we'd like to keep that investment property, and then that kind of muddles everything.
Right. So yes, there has been a lot of discussion regarding owner-occupied, not owner-occupied, and also long-term. You know, because the discussion comes up going, hey, you know what, yeah, I'm not owner-occupied, but what's making me different than a long-term renter or anything like that? There is a lot of discussion going on with that, but I feel at the same time, if it's, I will share with you some concerns that I have with changing a owner-occupied property from residential to non-residential. Is, folks, as assessor in the 2019 reappraisal, I went out and did a lot of open houses just to explain to folks how we value property every odd year. And I mean, we're in an extremely hot market, and in some neighborhoods, just based on the sales, I raised the values 30 to 35%. That is huge, and that's based on the sales. And so we're still seeing that active market. Here is my concerns, that I go back to the senior community, which ties back into 1982 when Senator Dennis Gallagher's like, there's a lot of seniors that couldn't afford their homes. I have talked to a handful of seniors who are operating a short-term rental where they lease out a bedroom or their basement to pay for their mortgage, because everything else in our community, everything around us is going up. But at least for our seniors, what's not going up? The income. And they're really having a hard time staying afloat and staying in their home. So they sit there and they basically are like, you know, I open this up, and this person that comes in and stays, it's helping me pay those taxes. It's helping me pay, you know, the mortgage and things like that. So there are concerns that I have there as well. as far as owner occupied. But to answer your question, yes, ma'am, there's a lot of discussion going on there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Brian Gibson. My concern's a little bit along the lines of what you were just explaining. In our situation, we actually live in the home. We live there full-time. We rent out part of it, and kind of being retired and kind of actually forced to be retired. But if, you know, the way you've been talking about it, like limiting it to 60 days, that would mean like, even though we're the only ones there for 80% of the time, you would force us to pay, you know, 500% increase in the taxes, which probably would result in us not being able to live there and have to sell our home. So it's significant difficulty, especially for those that actually live in the home. So I'm wondering where the arbitrary number of 60 days came from. And then more importantly, it seems to me that if you were going to charge people for renting out the use of their home, which you could do for almost any business to earn money, you know, why the 60 days? And then also, does that mean that we would only, or could we only then have to be charged for the days that we're actually using it for that, whether it's 30, 60, or 90 days, and the remaining 8 months we go back to, you know, what we should be paying as independent homeowners?
Right. So to answer your question, sir, I have no idea where he came up with the 60 days. That is something that I actually reached out to Christy McFarland, who's the assessor down there in Gunnison, great lady, and I asked that same question, where did the 60 days come from? But what I want to share with both of you is if it's owner-occupied property, not the whole property goes to non-residential. It's only the square footage that you are leasing out or renting out that goes to non-residential. This becomes a frigging nightmare for my office is when I'm sitting here going, really? I'm going to convert 400 square feet of a bedroom of this property and consider it mixed use, which, you know, at that time brings in $0, but it costs me a plethora of man, that's a word I never used. Like, wow.
Well,
but
plus our kids can come in and live with, you know, live with us,
Yeah.
or visit and stuff. So does that mean we have to pay commercial for our own kids to visit?
no.
You know, that's what it's
No.
sounding like at 60
No.
days. You know?
Not at all. And again, this is just conversation going on. I just wanted to share a conversation rumor. And it basically just introduce you guys to me and start going out to my website because I'm going to be pushing stuff out there, trying to keep everybody informed. I will try to figure out where the 60 days came from, but all I know right now is it's conversation, so I will keep everybody. Once CCI has their winter meeting coming up, then, you know, we'll see where it goes because our legislative session begins in January. So this is where now folks are looking at getting bill sponsors, pulling bills, is right now through Christmas time, as far as pulling bills, then they introduce them in January, and of course they go through the House and Senate from January through May. And so, but right now, that is just a conversation piece. It was a major discussion item for assessors at our summer conference. But to answer your question, I don't know where he came up with the 60 days, but if it's owner-occupied property, if they do not change things, then what we would have to sit there and use, you know, basically look at the same way we value mixed-use property, which is like, you know, I use Colorado Avenue as a great example. A lot of those properties are mixed use where the top floor is apartments, the bottom floor is retail. So we basically value the top floor as residential, the bottom as non-residential, and so it's, you know, it's mixed use. It's no different, but I tell you, it would be a pain in the butt subtracting out 400 square feet of a bedroom that you're leasing out as a VRBO or a short-term rental to do that. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, well, I guess the last comment is just related to is, it seems like if even the majority part of the year we're using it only for ourselves, you know, like say 60, 70, 80%, it doesn't seem fair to put a commercial rate on that. So.
Right. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for listening to our comments. And I mostly have comments, not questions.
Okay.
Except for one question. Can I ask how many people here do Airbnb or short-term rental and that sort of thing? Okay, good, good. All right. So I just basically want to talk to you about how strongly I feel about doing Airbnbs and how shocked I am to hear about this 29% tax that could eventually come upon us. I do an Airbnb, it's all Mr. Rogers themed. You walk in, there's a trolley, there's posters of Mr. Rogers all over the place. We have a Daniel Tiger room. And before we rented that, it was a place where we just rented out. And it just turned into a nightmare. The money that we had to spend to repair after these renters were finished. The last time we rented it, we had squatters move in and said, we're not going to move out. You can't make us move out. And we decided to go Airbnb and invite a very wholesome bunch. I mean, who else is going to rent Mr. Rogers' Airbnb, right?
Yeah.
And because they do backgrounds on us and because we do reviews on them, we feel like we have safety with our property. We feel like reputable, kind, good-hearted people are going to move in. And I might be wrong on this analogy, Steve, so help me out with this. I'm a school teacher, so I put things in very literal, concrete terms.
Thank you for being a teacher. My wife's been doing it 20
Yeah,
years.
yeah. And did I tell you I was a Whitefield grad? We probably had a lot of the same teachers. Anyway.
I was 87.
77.
Okay.
But it's all good.
Okay.
So when I hear about equitable, I think about the little boy in the lunchroom who has the bully come and ask money from him every day. And you have to give me your lunch money. Okay. Here's my money. You can have it. And then when another little boy comes in and he's got lunch money, he's got the Airbnb, the other boy says, oh yeah, you got to fork the money over to him because that's only equitable and fair. And so when I hear about when we're not even on the map, really in a sense, when we're not on the maps in all of the papers and the government, et cetera, and we're trying to figure out how to get a grasp on that, why would it be equitable to come along and tax us just because others are being taxed? To me, that's the lunchroom bully saying, we're going to take your money, and that's only fair because I took his money too, so you better just shape up. I'd rather feel like we were left on our own. Many of us are on a very, very, as a school teacher, I'm not rolling in the dough. I'm not making money hand over fist, not at all. And the money that I earned last year for my Airbnb, I put it all into making my property better. I pay taxes on my Airbnb. Every cent I earn, the tax man knows about it. My neighbors love that I have an Airbnb. I even take cookies to them to keep them happy, right? This is just something I so strongly believe in, and I don't mean to sound so simple, but I just would like us not to even have to worry about this 29 or 19, what was it, 29%?
29%.
That's mind-boggling. When I pay my housekeeper and I pay my daughter to come clean and we're paying utilities and everything else, it just, anyway, I don't mean to drag it on, other people need to talk, but.
Right, well, and the thing is, though, 29% is absolutely astronomical assessment rate. Again, I've been doing this 21 years, and and I've dealt with many non-residential property appeals. When folks that actually own commercial properties, if it's a car wash or a restaurant or a gym, they're sitting here going, what in the world? Anybody here live within School District 11? Okay, many of us. 3 years ago, and I tell you, we got a lot of appeals 3 years ago because at that time, School District 11 came to us voters and asked for a mill levy override, which was 13 mills. Many of us have sentimental hearts for schools, paying our school teachers, making sure our kids get the best education. But what happened is many property owners did not understand the ramification of 13 mills. For our commercial property owners, their taxes went up $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 just because of that 13 mil increase. And so I'm still dealing with that where, I sat down with a gentleman today who owns a storage unit right off guard to the gods. He's like, Steve, I can't do this. But the sad thing is, I can assist with the value. Let's take a look at the value. I have nothing to do with the mill levies. That's why we have elected school board members, Board of County Commissioners, City Council members. They are the ones that set the levies. But where I'm going with this is I agree. There needs to be a change in the assessment rate of the 29%. That's in discussion because Colorado touts itself as a very business-friendly state. How in the world are we friendly when we're sitting there quadrupling the taxes on commercial properties? And I'm not only talking short-term rentals or Airbnbs, I'm talking commercial vacant land. I mean, even the vacant land property owners are paying that 29%, and they're going, I got nothing on there. It's just a bunch of weeds. And so they're paying astronomical taxes as well. So these are conversations that are currently going on here at the state level. I want to congratulate you. You're sitting there talking about your relationship with your neighbors. Is Thursday, I've heard stories from property owners where they don't have that same relationship by a short-term rental. And we need to be very careful of grouping the good property owners, short-term rental Airbnb, to the ones that are not doing it the right way. Because I feel there is a large lump sum of those short-term rental Airbnb property owners that have gone underground because of the ordinances that are being passed by the municipalities, or even when you're talking about the valuation, is government going to be pushing these businesses underground? And so I actually congratulate you because, again, some of the stories that I've heard are some neighbors are not experiencing the same thing that you're showing to your neighbors. So thank you.
And I will say it's kind of scary to be one of the people who have a permit in the city because now we know the city's eyes can be upon us very quickly versus those who are not. And where's the equality in that?
Yeah. Well, it was pretty funny because I had a conversation with a very nice lady about an hour before we kicked this thing off. And she said, Steve, do you do a sign-up sheet? I'm going, absolutely not, because no one's going to fill it out. So it's like, the assessor's going to see that. I'm like, nope, everybody's just going to walk on by. So I said it's going to be a waste of paper. And so, but thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi. I'd first like to thank you for your 11 years of service.
Thank you.
To the Marines.
Thank you.
And for hosting this. My wife and I live in Texas, but we own the house that she grew up in. That's been in her family for over 50 years. And it's now a short-term rental, has been for almost 2 years. And in our first 2 years, we've probably had average of 80 nights both years, which is only 20% of the year. The other 80% of the year, it's either us using it as a vacation home, or it's vacant, or what we might do is try to rent it for 30, 60 days in the off season.
Yeah.
So obviously it sounds like I should be renting it October through February, right? So but
Great ski time.
yeah, right. But the 60-day thing, that just seems really crazy. I mean, that's like 17% of the year. Right. And even 80 days is only 20% of the year. So if it could be assessed 20% commercial, 80% residential, that's maybe something we could live with.
Yeah.
And I got to point out your example of the $300,000 home going from residential to commercial, that's actually a 306% increase from 1,600 to 6,500.
I was just looking at the assessment rate. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But from 7.15 to 29,
Yep.
also 306. So
yeah, it's man, you're going to make me take my shoes off and count my phalanges and reduce. So it is, and again, I have no idea where that 60 days came from. Yeah. I mean, he may have just sat there and said, you know what, we're going to go ahead and double the 30-day. And we're going to sit there and do 60 days. That may have been the thought process. But here's what scares me about this situation is I don't feel other communities are having this dialogue. And we got folks that are not having this dialogue that are coming up with these ideas to try to pass legislation. And this is where I truly feel, and today was probably a real blessing that we had the governor come down here and provide his private number to our PIO. And we share the pros and cons of short-term rental Airbnbs because it is a major topic. But again, my job as your elected official, county assessor, is to put that information out there. Right. And folks, guys, on my business card and also on the PowerPoint presentation, is I put my cell phone number. I have my cell phone on there all the time. You can text me, you can call me. I will tell you what, if you send me an email, some in this room that I've already met, very kind people, if you send me an email, do not be surprised if I don't call you back personally. And the reason why is because I feel sometimes the translation in emails gets lost. So I will reach back out to you and have a conversation.
And thank you for that.
Thank you so much, sir. How's it going, guy?
Good. My question is a little off topic. It's about your form TD 100.
The TD 1000?
The 1000, sorry,
Okay,
thank you.
yeah.
And it's regarding the questions about financing. You want to know information about a loan and interest rate and term and that sort of thing. Is that actually legally required to be filled out, or is that just kind of a information that you would like to have?
So what he's referring to, so he's asking about the Transfer Declaration 1000, commonly known as the TD 1000. It's a form that we all fill out when we close on our property at a title company. And what that form basically asks is, okay, what's your down payment? What's the interest rate? The amount financed? Is there any personal property, involved in the transaction? Is this an arm's length transaction? So his question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that legally, do we have to fill that out? Yes. So that is a state form. And the reason why is because we as assessors, again, when we value property, we have to do it by sales. And for the 2019 reappraisal, we use sales from July 1 of 2016 to June 30th of 2018. So by law, we have to use that 24 months. So really, when you got your notice of value on May 1, our data is about a year old. But the reason why that form is so important to all county assessors and also the state is we need to ensure it's an arm's length transaction. The other thing we need to ensure is if you purchase the home and if there was personal property associated with that sale, like, hey, if you buy my property, I'll give you the boat. And that happens quite a bit. So we need to deduct the value of that boat from your purchase price. So it is in accordance with law.
I guess my question is more specifically to the financing terms. In my line of business, I'm in finance, and so I feel that that's really none your business about what somebody's getting for a loan or down payment. I can understand personal property or anything else that has to do with the sale price, but as far as the loan amount goes, you said it yourself, 38 million hits to the website, and somebody's putting their personal information out there as far as what their down payment was, what they financed, what their interest rate was, and I feel like that's kind of if it's not, that information is not legally required, then perhaps something needs to change on that.
Right. So it is legally required on the transfer declaration. Now, when that information is put out onto the assessor's website, because if you look at each individual sale, you'll see, you'll see the interest rate, you'll see the down payment, the amount financed, things like that. I'll be honest with you, we are pushing the limit in regards to confidentiality because the transfer declaration is considered a confidential document.
It becomes public record when you put it out there.
However, the only way somebody can get your transfer declaration is through a court order.
Sure.
So it is considered confidential. However, some of that information is considered public. But I will tell you this, is if somebody called me up and said, Steve, I don't want it out there. I'm divorced, I'm going through a very bad divorce, I don't want that information out there, I take it off.
Or the state's looking at you as a short-term rental and they want to know what you financed or something.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely, I mean, you wouldn't be able to determine that on there anyways, but, I take...
So you could flip a switch and keep that information private?
Absolutely. In fact, I actually had a request last week where an individual's like, Steve, I don't want that out there,
right.
And shared for personal reasons.
Which is common for teachers, police officers.
But the reason why it's out there, it's really important because if an appraiser or a broker is if you're selling your home, they use that information as part of their appraisal report, or they're sitting there doing, MLS and things like that. But every appraiser, if they're using the home as a comparable or anything like that, they look at the financing, they want to make sure it's arm's length transaction, same thing. So they use that information for the report. But absolutely, if somebody calls me up and says, please take that off, there's no argument, I take it off.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Salinas. and we
Hi,
have a
Elizabeth.
small
How are you?
Good. A motel on West Colorado Avenue. And we have for our family, the Salinas family has owned and operated it for 40 years, since 1979.
Okay.
So I don't realize that the Airbnb short-term rentals, and we are seasonal. Most of us on West Colorado Avenue and Manitou are seasonal as well. And we do pay the 29%.
Right.
If you want to lower ours to theirs, we'd totally go for that. And our hot tub inspection, we only have the hot tub open 3 months out of the year, and we still pay for a whole year, as well as swimming pools. And this month, with all the construction this month, the last 2.5 years, we have lost, and this is our only income. And we do live on most of the small motels, we do live on the property. And it's our only income. So we have lost so much with the construction on West Colorado and Manitou Avenue. But 2 weeks ago, we had someone from the city show up saying we needed to put in a new backflow preventer for our water main. And we agreed, yeah, it's probably time for a new one. And they said, well, you need to write us a check for $5,300. And then we're going to have it, and we're having it put in as we speak. Ours will be connected, and there was a time frame on it. We had to get an extension because we had rooms occupied. We couldn't shut the water off to reconnect the new system. And then we have to pay to have that inspected every year, which we haven't done before. I know some new houses have a backflow preventer, but we don't do anything but rent rooms. And I understand that big corporations that produce chemicals need those, but so we're treated as such, even though we're just a small motel.
Right.
So we do. I don't know that they understand that we are just families that live on our properties and rent them out as well, and we're seasonal, but we have to pay these high rates all year round. And that includes the trash pickup, our insurance, utilities, and the inspection fees for pool, hot tub, and now for the backflow preventer. And in some years, we have to pay that when we're not even open and making $1. We just have to make sure our summer funds get us through the winter while we do our improvements. And, the parking as well. And even for losing so much business the last couple summers without traffic flowing well on West Colorado and Manitou Avenue, we said, really, you're going to hit us up for this backflow preventer right now for this amount of money? And they did, and they said, yeah, if you don't meet the deadline, you have to close. I'm like, oh my God, can we get an extension? And we actually had to hire someone to file for I said, I don't know how to file for that. So we did find someone who did file for the extension. But I mean, in all fairness, we have been paying them all, and we're only seasonal as well. So it's like they rent their house out part of the year. Well, they should pay year-round because we have to pay year-round. Cable vision, everything. Trash pickup, we're closed in the winter. And every time they pick up my trash, it's $85.
Yeah.
Is it $85 every time they pick up your trash at your house? I don't think so.
Well, you know what? Thank you, and I tell you, I do feel sorry for the businesses on the west side.
Yeah, it's tough right now.
West Colorado and Manitou, because you guys have been struggling since 2012, since the fire.
Correct. And we were empty. We couldn't rent, right.
Yeah, and what a lot of residents don't know is the ongoing disasters that are continuing with the floods on the west side from the burn scar, things like that. And as soon as they get basically the flooding taken care of, this is when they dug up Colorado Avenue, Manitou, and nothing but construction. And if you drive that thing, it's like crazy. And it basically impacted businesses. But I'm glad you really bring this up because you're talking about the fair and equitable piece of it. When you're going, I'm a hotel owner and I'm providing a service to the same customer as short-term rental Airbnbs. And so completely understand that. And one thing that I forgot to mention is another concern in regards to converting short-term rental Airbnbs from residential to non-residential, which is something you have to comply with, is once it's converted to non-residential, is ADA standards.
Correct.
And so, when you're sitting here looking at what is it going to be to the cost of the property owner who's running a short-term rental or Airbnb to comply with ADA, which means there's a lot of money that goes into that. So, that's one thing, bringing up. But absolutely, I will share with you is I mentioned that we had a conversation at the Assessors Association Summer Conference. And of course, some assessors are like, Steve, what are your thoughts? What do you think would work? And I threw an idea out there, and about 80% of them shook their head, absolutely not. Some said, hey, that's not a bad idea. But I'm an individual that I'll read the front of the page, but you know what? I want to look at what's on the back side of the page as well. And I actually made a proposal is to make things fair and equitable, why don't you just reduce the hotel, motel, bed and breakfast down to 7.15%?
Right.
Many don't agree with that. But I tell you is, it makes sense to me when I'm looking at the impacts that it has on staff and things like that. Many people look at the loss of revenue. I look at the impacts that it has on county staff and resources and things like that. Because guess what? It's our tax dollars that's paying my salary. And it's the tax dollars paying my staff's salary as well. And when you sit there and you look at, I'm estimating between 3,000 to 3,500 short-term rental Airbnbs here in El Paso County.
How many short-term rentals?
I'm estimating between 3,000 and 3,500
Okay.
throughout the whole entire county. You have any idea how many bed and breakfasts that we have here in El Paso County? Less than 50. So when
And bed and breakfast has health department inspection as well,
exactly.
on top of that.
Exactly.
Even if they're closed during
But
the winter months.
But I will
Correct.
tell you is, believe it or not, if you're starting to think like me, you need to go get some counseling. But you know, it's one of those where I actually brought it up, and I'm just being very honest, where many assessors are like, no way. But trust me, these are conversations that I want to have with you guys, and I am just being as transparent as all get out is, I actually brought that up in regards to let's have the discussion of just dropping the hotel, motel, bed and breakfast community to 7.15%, leaving the short-term rentals. Now, keep in mind, you know, I know there's folks that are out there that don't agree with that, and again, they live next door to a bad short-term rental owner. But those are conversations that we need to have with land use, code enforcement, the sheriff, things like that. But when it comes to the valuation and classification of it, is to me, researching and basically having the discussion is if you provide lodging is to stay at the residential rate. I'm definitely open to sit there and having those discussions and pass those along because I actually brought up the same idea.
And that the small, and the large ones as well, because they have to compensate, you know, for their staff and their overhead.
Yeah.
I mean, and at small motels, we have a wedding party in and they're renting 4 rooms, and then somebody goes online and finds an Airbnb and they all check out.
Yep.
And I could be, you know, just a jerk about it and say, you're still obligated to pay me for the whole stay, but I don't. I say, you can have your money back. And then, but those are rooms I could have rented 2 weeks ago to maybe someone else wanted, but they took them and now they've left after 24 hours because we found a house, we don't need 4 rooms.
Yeah.
So we're just sitting empty, and that is our only income.
Yeah. So let me play the devil's advocate to that. So,
And we can't lower our, I've got an email, and I'm hoping I can come across it from Airbnb saying, you should do this, and here's how many rooms were rented on Airbnb, and it had a line around our motel, and it was maybe a 4 or 5 block square area, and it said 300 rooms rented in April. 300? I have 22 rooms, and I didn't rent 300 in April.
Yeah.
So we're just, our numbers are going down and down and down.
But, so let me share the devil's advocate piece there is, let's say we drop all, you know, if you provide lodging, even campgrounds, you provide overnight lodging and drop them down to the residential assessment rate. What is that going to say for the big Marriotts to come in and buy up swaths of these properties and neighborhoods? You know, and that is a major concern. And they're sitting there going, you know, they come into Colorado and they're going, man, the taxes are low. You know, we could sit there and buy up a whole entire street. You know, so therein lies some concerns. So we just need to really, you know, have those discussions, which is completely different. I mean, you're a local business owner, but, you know, again, the Marriotts that will come in or things like that and just going, you know, every time a house goes up on the market, next thing you know, that street, there's actually 10 short-term rentals and only 4 single-family residential properties. That is a concern too.
And we've had people approach us saying, can we stay here for a long term? Maybe they're attending a class or something for more than a month or so. And they'll say, because rentals are high, we can't find it, and we want to be on the west side. I said, yeah, they are high.
Yeah.
And I'll try to do my best to accommodate them, because that's what we do. But the rentals are going up for that reason. People are buying them just to rent them out and just to be a big business at a low rate, low tax rate, where we can't compete. I mean, fair competition. We love the competition. We've never been against competition having a small motel, but it's just not fair that our overhead is just astronomical.
Yeah.
And
Well,
even little things like your bank loan, your mortgage, like a home and you've mentioned it before, if the homeowners had a mortgage and their banker knew they rented a room out, 2 years ago, our flood insurance notification did not get to the bank, but we had it in place, literally because 9 inches of a building are in a floodplain. You have to insure the whole place.
Right.
Really, this much is in the floodplain, and so they force-placed on our loan $12,000.
Well, you're
And they
also-
gave us like so much time to say, show us your flood policy. And so we got it right over to them. But I said, really? You can just take that out of our bank account like that? They go, absolutely, or it goes on your mortgage, even though it's not huge. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, are you going? And that's annual.
Well,
Yeah.
in valued as non-residential property, you're also paying higher storm.
Oh yeah.
And so, but no, I appreciate your
Right.
comment because
And my husband said, he goes, I'm afraid to go. Everyone's going to be Airbnb. I said, I know, but we're small business also.
yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate it, and that's why we're here having this discussion is about
Mm-hmm.
being fair and equal. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I just want to tell you a little bit about our story. We're just a small fish in the pond, but my husband and I moved here to be closer to our family recently, and he's retired and disabled, and I am not a teacher, but I do work for a local school district. So when we bought our home, we did have the full intent of renting out one room as Airbnb, and we are planning to live in it year-round. So this was without the knowledge of this proposed tax that's coming up. And if this tax does go through, it will probably devastate us, and we will no longer be able to live in the same home that we have now. So my question to you is, if this proposed tax does go through, is it possible that people who have had this business prior to the tax could be grandfathered in and not be charged such an enormous tax? So I would like for you to take that to your committee, if you would.
Yeah, so keep in mind, I don't want you to worry because, we're not moving anywhere in El Paso County. We're basically having the discussion now. And as I mentioned, is because the definition of short-term rental Airbnb is currently not defined in Colorado statute. So I don't want you to sit there and have some anxiety and have some sleepless nights. So, right now, just based on that, if I were to sit there and just off a whim change the classification of your property and you appeal it, I'd have to change it back to residential. So don't worry about that. I will tell you is just knowing what I know at the state legislature and dealing with the senior homestead exemption, the disabled veteran exemption, I don't think that would ever be a possibility in regards to being grandfathered in. They would just basically, state in statute if you are operating X as of this particular date, you're going to be valued at this. I have never seen them grandfather properties in, and trust me, I have tried. For example, I was up there having a conversation about the senior homestead exemption, and for those that you don't know about that, it is a great property tax exemption here in the state of Colorado, which is if you're 65 years or older and you resided in your home as a primary residence, you get the 50% off the value of your property. So what it is really, if the value of your property is $200,000, you're only taxed on $100,000. So it's a great benefit to our seniors. Now, I have tried to push legislative bills on that and grandfather people in. So for example, what I'm looking at is a medical necessity bill. I've had some very sad conversations with property owners, seniors, where they're still living in their home and they won't sell the 4-bedroom, 3-bath house they no longer can maintain because they'll lose their exemption and they got that start that 10-year clock all over. But these are seniors that can no longer go up the stairs or down the stairs, and they're using the main floor as their master bedroom. And I mean, it's extremely sad. So right now, I'm working with House District 20, Terry Carver. She's a representative, and also Bob Gardner, who's one of our state senators. And they're going to pick up this bill. What we're going to propose this year is the medical necessity bill. Is if a doctor feels this medical necessity, you need to downsize and move because you can no longer live in this house going up and down if you got a fake knee, fake hips, different things like that, or if you have to sell your property to be closer to a dialysis center or your primary care physician or the VA clinic. I should, as the assessor, be allowed to take that exemption and move it from your former residence to your new one, and you don't have to wait 10 years. Because sadly, here's what's happening, is that exemption is actually taken away one of your property rights, which is buying, selling property, because our seniors When they get a benefit, they hold on to it. They won't let go because they're like, it seems like everything in their life is getting taken away from them. So I am very sincere about this, but when I'm sitting there talking about looking at grandfathering, I actually brought this up at last legislative session. That got killed within a week.
Okay,
So absolutely. But I will definitely keep that in mind and I will bring it up.
thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Hey, good evening, Steve. Thanks for doing this. And everybody, I'm sure, is really glad to be here and have a chance to give some input. And I met Steve about a month ago in his office, and this guy's got his head on his shoulders. So thanks very much for doing
Thanks,
this. Now, having got your attention, I have a different perspective to offer. So first off, this is often framed as a property right issue. Is that what you've heard as well? Is this is a property right? I have a right to rent? Okay.
Yep.
So one perspective, at least my perspective on that, is you absolutely have a right to rent to long-term renters in a residential zone. And that's, of course, going over here to zoning and use and other stuff that you're not in charge of. But it's just reframing it. So when you have your list of concerns up there, I thought to myself, well, this is because folks, and I'm not blaming anyone for doing this, because who wouldn't make a buck when you could, right? You've got this available, this new technology's here, you can connect with people all over the world. Who wouldn't do that? Like, I'm not blaming anyone for doing that. However, when folks just jump in, sign up on Airbnb, and start using their property in a completely different way than residential, and that's what the state law currently says, right? It hasn't been changed.
Right.
Now, no, STRs are not defined, but they are 30 days or less. Okay, so essentially, folks, all of those concerns you have are there because unwitting folks are just jumping into the Airbnb, VRBO, et cetera game, meaning well, and essentially they're skirting some laws here. They're using property in ways it wasn't intended to be. They're doing this in zones that weren't zoned for commercial. They're unaware of the commercial tax. And so all of these concerns that are up there are because, well, we have not been doing this equitably and fair, and that's what the woman had a hotel. She's been doing this for years. Suddenly, the market's flooded because folks can do it really easy and, frankly, on the margins. And so I just wanted to make sure to speak to that, because I think that's why we're all so frustrated and confused about what's even going on. It's happened so fast, largely because there's no barriers, right? And Airbnb's just saying, go for it. And by the way, you're responsible as hosts to figure out all the laws. It's not us. They're not going to support you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I thought that's interesting, and that's why you're so concerned, because it's been done in the margins. And so I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad we're all here in this room talking about this together.
Well, good to see you again tonight. You know, and we did meet in my office about a month ago. And basically, I will share with you, it is property rights. It's like, who's to tell me what I, do, with my property. But I will tell you at the same time, and I don't know if I shared this with you in our meeting. Man, I can't even remember what the heck I ate last night. Yeah. But I feel, and I mentioned that I'm extremely proactive and not reactive, is if the law is changed and they basically do come down saying, hey, these types of properties are considered non-residential. It is my duty to educate these property owners, because it's only right, because I feel that they deserve the opportunity, and that's why we're all here getting educated a little bit, where they can make an informed decision going, okay, I know what's coming down. Do I still want to stick with this business model? And I feel they deserve the opportunity to change their business model without being impacted. And that way they can sit there and go, I'm just going to go ahead and either sell this property, or I'm going to turn it into a long-term rental, things like that. Or you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and up the rents on this and keep it as a short-term rental. But I feel all property owners deserve that respect. If you're a short-term rental Airbnb owner or whatever, but you deserve that opportunity instead of just getting the word through a notice of value going, what in the heck just happened?
Absolutely, and we really appreciate that. So in terms of property rights, another actual property right that's kind of universal is the right to quietly enjoy one's property. And that's why there is some pushback, and not every host is good. Even if they are, I actually live near a host, an Airbnb, and it's operated pretty well. But every time I see it, I think that used to be my neighbor with their kids growing up, and this is you know what I mean? It's a lost opportunity. When we start using homes for tourists, we are eroding our neighborhoods one by one. And that's really concerning to me. I'll just put it out there. I started a group trying to get that primary residency requirement in because I have no problem with my neighbor sharing a part of their home because that's what it all started with. I still have a neighbor. But there's a lot of folks in town, and the awareness is growing, who are very concerned about this erosion of our community. And, you know, there's the math I did on because the city had their, that's the other one. One more thing, I could talk for hours, but so the city had a few companies come in, software companies that can scour the web, so you folks don't have to. And Host Compliance put out 2,600 listings in the Springs, not the county. And of those, about 2,300 were short-term rentals, unique properties, because sometimes you're listing Airbnb, VRBO, and other sites. So let's say it's 2,300. And of the permits that have been issued, 61% of those permits are for folks who do not live in the home. So real quick math there is roughly 1,300 homes that are not available to residents who live here. And it's going to grow and grow and grow. It's gone up 200% in just the last couple of years. And that's why we're here. It's growing, it's impacting more and more folks. And so thank you for taking the time and listening.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. What is a realistic timeline for change if and when there is to be change? And who are the elected officials who are the point figures at this point for any kind of change, driving it forward, against it? Who would we contact and start a dialogue with, senior elected official-wise?
So the question was, did everybody hear that question over here? So the question was, what is a realistic time frame that we're looking at here? And who do we need to contact in regards to elected officials, you know, things like that, to sit there and start this dialogue with not only the county assessor, but also with our House District Rep and our state senators and things like that. So to answer your question, ma'am, is right now I really don't know because, again, we had a bill that was proposed last year that got killed. And right now we don't have a definition of short-term rental Airbnbs in statute. But I will tell you, the soonest probably would be 2021, 2022, payable in 2023. You know, when you're looking at that, that would be the soonest. But again, there's a lot of things that need to happen as we sit there, we talked about in regards to the education piece and communicating. Now, to share with you is how do you start the communication piece? It really depends on where you live or where, if you are you a short-term renter or operator? So wherever your property's at, I'd be more than happy to put you in contact with either House District Rep and State Senator. Because, you know, we got 20 different House districts throughout El Paso County, and then we have a handful of state senators. So I actually have that information from the clerk and recorder, and I've got their contact information. But like I said, I have reached out. I emailed every elected official, and you know, some have shown up. This evening I have not seen anybody, but there was a handful that were here on Thursday. I'll probably see some this upcoming Thursday. But if you shoot me an email, I'll definitely put you in contact with them. Absolutely, you're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Powers.
Hi, Sherry. How are you?
I am one of the odd ones in the group, more like that gentleman. I actually am a neighbor of a VRBO. And one of my concerns was, of course, that for about almost 2 years, I didn't understand why I saw strange people on the porch until I finally had an incident with a guest. And I was able to locate it, reach out to the owners. The owners were very nice. We've had a pretty good relationship for the most part until just recently when I had to get a hold of code enforcement and push because the owners said that there were no rules, regulations, anything that said they couldn't have their porch light on in the backyard, which unfortunately, if you look at their VRBO page, looking out from their porch is directly across from my bedroom window. So we got that resolved. However, trying to find out a little bit more about them, going out onto the website, not as many are as gracious and good to their neighbors. I didn't know that this person was a VRBO, didn't understand that the city recommends you send a letter to your neighbors saying, hello, we are using our home for this thing. The individual hasn't lived in the house for 3 years. I would like to know, is there any consideration for those individuals that live in their home, they're owner-operated? I understand the need to be able to sell or to rent it out for a few times a year while you're on vacation, to make extra money, to be able to take care of your home and whatever. But for those people that actually do not live in it, they use it as an investment property to make money, to pay their mortgage, have a little extra money. Is there a consideration that maybe that tax rate isn't 29, but they consider something like 10 or 11% because they are using that property and making gain? As an accountant, that is usually what happens for a lot of businesses when they are renting properties long-term. They are taxed at a little bit more because they are using it for investment.
So, you know, as mentioned, there has been conversation in regards to not owner-occupied, and things like that. Last Thursday, there was a gentleman that actually brought up a great idea. And he sat there and he said, Steve, you know what? I have a short-term rental. It's in Old North End. I got a great rapport with my neighbors. But he said, you know what? Just taking me from 7.15% to 29% in 1 year is a huge chunk. What about incrementally bringing it on up through several reappraisal years, things like that? However, the drawback to that is that would have to go to the vote of the people. Because, you know, as I mentioned, we got the Tabor Amendment, we got the Gallagher Amendment, we got very confusing tax laws. So, you know, that would be very difficult. I just lost it. Okay, there it is. So, you know, just trying to educate the voter about that would be extremely difficult. But, you know, again, one of the things is absolutely, I heard from a lot of folks last Thursday and also some phone calls of folks that feel they're impacted. Their property rights are being impacted by short-term rental Airbnbs. They don't have an owner like we met this evening. And so, you know, what I shared with them is they feel they have no recourse. You know, they're like, we've called code enforcement, we've called, you know, this or that. And what I shared with them is, if you're having a hard time as your elected official, absolutely, my phone's wide open. Even though I'm not in charge of land use, code enforcement, you know, zoning, any of that stuff, I'm you know, again, what I said is, I'm in charge of valuation and classification of the property. But I do know the individuals that are in charge of those departments. And I could put you in contact with the person, you know, that is in charge. But at the same time, you know, the argument then goes, are you impacting my business? You know, there's a lot of discussion that is going on with this. But if you feel impacted, you know, I would be more than happy to take your phone call and contact people.
Well, the code enforcement took care of it, and the owners were very good about taking care of it.
Yeah.
Now, also as a homeowner, my concern is when I go to try and sell, if I tell the person, by the way, that's basically a hotel behind me, that's, you know, somebody rents short term, so you're going to see different people coming and going. Some buyers may not want that kind of a deal because they don't want to have to deal with it. Unfortunately, most of my neighbors around me behind, the neighbors to the sides apparently knew, but those of us behind didn't, and it was kind of a surprise to us because most of us have been in the neighborhood. I've been there 24 years. I'm an original owner, and the house two down was 19, another one there is 20, and so a lot of us were just questioning, you know, what's the value to us? Because somebody might not want that in their backyard. They are good landlords. They do take care of the property. They have great ratings, but again, I'm lucky. Not everybody is, and if they're going to be generating a fair amount of income on a property they're not living in,
Right.
maybe they need to pay a little more. I'm not saying 29%, but I do think that something has to give there because that is an investment property. It's not a home where somebody is trying to make ends meet by having a room to make sure they can remain in the property.
Well, I agree with you 100%. When you're sitting there talking about when you disclose, you know, if you go to sell the property and you disclose that there's a short-term rental behind you or next door to you, is that going to sit there and limit a potential buyer? Yes, I agree with that. But to me, there are buyers out there that are okay living next to a high school. And, you know, and I tell you, it was only about 5 years ago I had the same conversation with the wind turbines and the power lines out east. You know, when they put up 174 wind turbines out there, folks are like, no one is going to buy these properties. No one's going to want to live next door to above ground transmission lines and the wind turbines out in Calhoun. My job as assessor is to basically track the sales and see what's going on. And believe it or not, there is a lot of transactions going out there. There are people that are okay living next to the transmission lines with a 300-foot buffer. There are buyers out there that are okay living next to the wind turbines, and I've seen no diminution in value whatsoever. You know, and again, I use the burn scar. You know, Mountain Shadows, I'm still tracking those sales. Folks are sitting there going, hey, I'm okay living, you know, I'm buying a property here, you know, on the burn scar and stuff like that. But I will tell you, yes, you're going to have a buyer that goes, you know what, I don't want to live here because of a short-term rental, but you're going to have a buyer going, I'm okay, you know, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, that's how Kendra and I got into our house, right behind, I live right off Centennial Boulevard. And right behind me is a Mormon church. And the buyer that was in there said, I don't want to live with the church right behind my house. I'm like, I'm okay with it. But it comes down to the difference, you know, in buyers. We all go for different things. But I do agree with you. It possibly could limit buyers.
Well, I think given the market right now and the availability of housing, people will buy. I think if the market starts to downturn, I think that will be where you have fewer people purchasing and buyers, then you may find yourself on the losing end.
Yeah.
Your job is not going to be easy one way or another, and I appreciate it.
If you want to be popular, don't run for assessor. So it's like,
I'll stick with what I do. I'm an accountant. I'll stay there.
well, you're popular April 15th. So
No, the 15th is next week.
yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi.
Hi
Thank
there.
you. Okay, I'm confused. The confusion is, say I have a house and I rent it long-term for 6 months, 12 months, and I receive an income from those rentals. Why is that not commercial and short-term is considered commercial?
Well, based on that, the current definition in long-term stay, which is 30 days or more, stays at the residential assessment rate of 7.15%.
The way it's categorized.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Same principle.
Yep.
You're still receiving money for income for rent.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So no different than an apartment or anything like that. You know, as I mentioned, per the Tabor Amendment, if you're classified as residential, we can only use a sales market comparison approach. We cannot use income or cost.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll bring it home.
Man, we got 15 minutes.
My name's Justin Burns. I'm an agent with Farmers Insurance.
Hey, Justin, how are you, man?
I'm good. I do not own a short-term rental. I actually live in an HOA that does not allow it. But a lot of my clients do ask me about renting out their houses or their tiny houses, and it's a challenge with insurance. But I think my first comment is a statement. I feel like Gallagher as a whole, this Airbnb thing is just a Band-Aid for Gallagher. The revenue that they're trying to capture is minuscule in comparison to what really needs to happen at the state level. So I'm totally in the favor of revisiting Gallagher and maybe even repealing it, just because it doesn't make sense. It maybe did 30 years ago, but it doesn't today.
Right.
And then what if you live in a special district or, say, urban renewal area or a metro district that has a PIF or a TIF?
Do you work in the assessor's office, man?
No, but I'm one of your 39 million hits. I visit your website about 80 times a day. So,
Yeah.
you know, I live in Gold Hill Mesa. We are a special district.
Yep.
And I personally pay about double property tax what a normal house like mine would pay.
Because that 50 mils for that special district.
Because of my special district. So, you know, I chose to live there. I chose to move there. I chose not, you know, to have an HOA. That's my choice as a buyer. But what about the people that live there and their HOA may allow for it? I think choosing to tax that property and just, I think it's a very slippery slope to say this is now a commercial property. If I wanted to have a college kid or, you know, couch surfers, or I had a spare bedroom, you know, it's still my primary home, but I want people to rent out. I'm living there, but I'm letting someone rent out a room. I think that's a lot different than if you're renting out the house, you know, 9 months out of the year and you're never there.
Right.
So I think the slippery slope happens once they're classified as commercial property. You're right. Utilities is going to go crazy. Insurance is nuts. All of the ancillary things. And I think at the end of the day, they should just say, yes, we want it, or yes, we don't want it. Because the amount of money that you're making, so $12,000 a year, or let's say you even make $100,000 a year, you're already now paying sales tax. So we are collecting revenue, by the way, right? That was the whole point of the permit, to get the sales tax, right?
And the lodging, yeah, and the LART.
And so maybe we impose a lodging tax, but going the property tax route is not right. It's either I think as a state, we should just say, yay, we want it, or nay, we don't want it. Because at the end of the day, that's where it's going to go.
I tell you what, holy crap, man, you know quite a bit. I completely agree with you, the repeal of Gallagher, because the question that comes up, folks are sitting there going, how do we get this repealed in our tax code, because it's very confusing. And when you're talking about a major difference of 29% and 7.15%, that is a huge gap. But back in 1982, it was here, slowly comes down, but once Tabor that came into play in 1992, it started doing this. This is a huge increment between non-residential and residential. And so the discussion is, how do you educate the public to get rid of Gallagher? That is a monumental task. So things that I have shared as the president of the Colorado Assessor Association is maybe we're looking at this a little bit wrong. Is why is it the 45-55 split? Was that based on a 1982 market? What's the 2019 market? Would that percentage be completely different? In addition, is I think voters would actually buy into is we get the Gallagher amendment because we don't want our assessment rates going through the roof, is every 3 reappraisals, which is every 6 years, because that's basically what the cycle of a real estate market is. And believe it or not, I can't believe how long this one has been going on. But every 6 years, we look at what the percentage is based on the current market. Is it supposed to be 75, 25, things like that? You put a ceiling on the residential, non-residential rate, and you put a basement on the residential, non-residential rate. You allow both rates to fluctuate within there. I think the voters would probably look at that going, all right, I know for a fact based on law that my rate can't go above X, but the municipalities that are dependent upon property taxes are going, hey, I'm okay because I know it won't go below Y. So those are conversations that I think that we need to have as we may be overthinking this and just look at what the 45-55 split was. What was that mindset? But you brought up some good points.
Bones.
Yeah, but man, when you're starting to bring up TIFs and URAs and special districts, things like that, yeah.
Well, and the other thing too is you mentioned the HUD, the VA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. I mean, what does happen if they're classified as commercial real estate?
Right.
I mean, you could see just Hiroshima, right?
Absolutely.
So, and then final thing, so what should I tell my clients? Like, go get a permit. You're going to rent your house out for one night, maybe a week. Go get a permit. I'll make sure that you have the right insurance. And then just wait.
So here's what I would share with your clients, what I've been sharing with a lot of our property owners. is don't fret. There's nothing currently in Colorado law that dictates short-term rentals Airbnbs. The assessor right now does not have the law to back him to make that change. You know, like I said, is I could sit there and change it today, but I will sit there and lose the appeal, or I would lose in district court like that. So
are the permits legal, you think?
So as far as going through the city of Colorado Springs?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because, you know, that's what most, and we got 10 minutes.
Okay, well,
So,
we
you
can
know,
skip that.
I'll tell you is.
We have another person.
Yeah. I definitely would reach out to the city on that because I know the city is, you know, doing their ordinances, the permitting and things like that. However, that is not happening in El Paso County. The county does not have a process of permitting. So this is where I come down to, I can't even guarantee fair and equitable assessment. So if I'm picking up this young lady's short-term rental within the city of Colorado Springs, she's going to be going, hey, what about the one in Monument?
Yeah.
This isn't fair. But it goes to that where,
Well, and I think it's fair. They should pay the sales tax.
Right.
They're collecting revenue.
well,
Yeah,
and I heard people sitting there going, this permit of $150 is just for a piece of paper. What does that go to? And so, you know, and again, it's a great question for your council member.
Okay.
So I don't know about that.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, man. So, yes, ma'am.
Who's next?
Yeah.
I'm going to be I'm very, very quick, very, very quick. I just wanted to share something because this might be a unique experience if anyone is considering this. I'm owner-occupied short-term rental on the west side. It's always full. I don't have any problems keeping it full. But for various reasons, I attempted to convert it back to long-term 3 times this year. I rented it out long-term for 13 years. Before that, I had waiting lists and tenants come back. The 3 attempts this year, I got not one phone call.
What do you think that's attributable to?
I have no idea because I know that the rental market has skyrocketed.
It has.
So I started a little higher. I mean, the downstairs is a shared space, but I've always gotten divorces, you know, separations, relocators, and military. And that has been the primary, you know, focus of my tenants. But that's not, I'm just sharing this for whatever it's worth because I can't put a figure on it. I dropped my rates actually about $100 to $200 lower than they were 3 years ago, before the boom, and no phone calls. So I don't know if anybody's considering converting, but make sure you do your homework before you do, because I may be, I mean, I know we still are maybe 2 years out, but I may be, now I'm forced to stay kind of with Airbnb.
Yeah.
Or really suffer.
Yeah.
For 13 years, I've been used to a certain amount of income to pay certain X amount of bills. So I just wanted to share that because it's just something you probably didn't think was happening.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi there.
Hi, my name is Farrell.
Farrell.
I don't know if I'm in an unusual area. I'm downtown. Almost everybody on my alley, on my block, has an accessory dwelling unit. Some of them are renting them out long-term, some short-term. My neighbors love having the guests. It's a wonderful experience for me. I love doing it. It's an apartment over my garage. So it's an accessory dwelling unit, which poses a really interesting thing as far as taxation, in my opinion. As far as the lady that has the hotel, I do think their rates are exorbitant. Something needs to be brought down. I'm wondering, the other thing though is our property taxes are extremely low in this city. My sister had a house similar size, similar value in Nebraska. Her property taxes were $7,000 a year. So I think that property taxes can actually go up in this town a little bit to help our budget. And maybe we need to get rid of Tabor. Just.
Thank you. Hi there.
I do have a question regarding the long-term versus the short-term rental laws, and maybe I'm missing something. So why is short-term rental being considered transforming or changing to commercial, but long-term is not even on the table? Why is long-term being protected and not short-term?
So basically, very easy, based on the current statute and definition of today, is the long-term definition is 30 days or more. And
About the definitions.
yeah, so basically, here's what has happened, is this is a statute that was proposed, and put into law 2 decades ago. Well, guess what we weren't having the discussion of 2 decades ago? No one knew what Airbnb short-term rentals were at that time. The reason why this came about, this statute, 2 decades ago is because the hot thing at that time, 20 years ago, was bed and breakfast and timeshares. And so it was our mountain communities that were sitting there pushing this because of timeshare properties. But based on the current Colorado law, the definition of long-term rental and short-term, and so short-term rentals, Airbnbs, many will sit there and argue that based on the business model, they fit that short-term rental because they're being leased or rented out for less than 30 days. But again, they're not defined.
So is the statute say something as far as long-term rental cannot be converted to commercial property? Is that what the statute currently says?
No, in fact, we actually, there are a number of properties that we change the use of yearly where they go from residential to commercial. An example that I brought up are some residential properties around Colorado Avenue where you see that they're actually operating as a business. So we sit there and we make those classification changes all the time. Yeah, so, but a long-term rental, absolutely, it can be converted to residential. But again, the crux is just not having the definition of short-term rental Airbnbs. I hope that answered your question. It doesn't look like it did.
It's fine, yeah.
Okay.
I just have a quick question. I got on Facebook today, tracked you there, looked up the county commissioners meeting, watched you speak. When you said to watch you on your website for what you learn, for different posts, will all that be shared to Facebook? So if we follow you on Facebook, we'll get that, or do we need to be digging in your website regularly?
I can't believe you're going to my Facebook page.
I wanted to see if this was for real.
If you, so if you print out my picture and hang it in your garage, it will scare away every
Do I get a
rodent known to
lower
man.
property rate if I do that?
Yeah, but no, absolutely. So we plan on posting this out to Facebook, and we put it on to the county assessor's website. And I also do know that our public information officer is going to put this meeting on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
So it will be out there for all to see and hopefully get educated. So if you got friends, say you're going, hey, go out there. But yeah, we're going to go ahead, and once this is produced, I'm going to be sharing it on the Facebook page.
Okay.
You can also not only go to the county assessor's Facebook page where folks are like, Steve, we can't make comments. Guys, friend me. Go on to Steven Schleiker, because I actually use that as the assessor's Facebook page too. And I allow comments, and we can have some dialogue going back and forth on Facebook.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and also the podcasts with KRDO 13. Okay, we got a couple minutes. How's it going, man?
Hey, Steve, Darren Short. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
It seems like the main issue here is defining income properties versus short-term rental, long-term rental, all that stuff. So would it make more sense, rather than defining what a short-term rental is, to define this is an income property? Quick story, my wife was a teacher, was diagnosed 3 years ago with stage 4 cancer, had to stop teaching, stays at home now with our boys. We converted our lower level. I work at a nonprofit ministry in town, so I'm not bringing in big bucks. I'm not making money hand over fist.
Yeah.
We converted our basement into a short-term rental. We're owner-occupied. We live there. Our neighbors love us, love the interaction with guests that come in. So just another story to kind of balance out the others that we've heard. We use that to help pay our mortgage, to stay where we are, so my wife can stay home and focus on her health, focus on raising our boys. I guess the question is, does it make more sense to assess what is an income generation property versus what is a short-term rental, what is a long-term rental?
So, man, I'm sorry to hear about your wife, but glad it sounds like things are going well. She's staying at home. But I tell you what, that is a great debate amongst assessors, is owner occupied versus non-owner occupied. And I will tell you, I know for a fact that is going to be a major debate this year at the legislative session in regards to owner occupied and not owner occupied property and what is, considered income producing. Like I said, I'm going to share as much information out there. I do know many folks that are involved in this communication, this dialogue, are not in favor of raising the taxes on owner-occupied properties. Again, that's why we have the O'Neill versus Conejos County ruling, where the court came down and said, hey, you're using that as your primary residence, even though you're renting out short-term rental in your basement. Right now, we got a ruling, saying otherwise. It's probably going to come down to the owner-occupied is where we're going to probably see legislation this year dealing with the not owner-occupied. Here's the concern that I have. How am I going to determine that? That's going to be extremely difficult of determining what is owner-occupied, not owner-occupied. And again, here's where we get into the crux of it though too, is somebody can come to me and said, Steve, I lived in there for the month of January on your assessment date. So it was residential as of that date.
So it's similar to a capital gains tax that you pay where you've got to prove residency for 2 out of 5 years. Is there a way to define that?
I think it'd be extremely difficult. I haven't thought of that, but I will tell you that's one of the reasons why, I live by the analogy KISS, keep it simple, stupid, which is why I came up with a proposal and shot it out to the assessors of, why don't we just keep the short-term rentals and owner-occupieds at 7.15% and drop the hotel, motel, bed, and breakfast down to 7.15%. So the thing with that is it equals the playing field. Everything is fair and equitable. It reduces a lot of headache. It makes it very simple with Colorado law. However, the concern is where you got people coming in and buying up swaths of property where, we just heard a lady going, our taxes are low. They are, and investors actually recognize that going, I'm going to buy a bunch of these properties because the taxes in Colorado are extremely low. I'm going to be making, bank. So there's concerns there. But I will tell you, most of the discussions is around non-owner occupied. So.
Great. Thanks for being proactive. I appreciate you hosting us and answering all these questions.
Man. Thanks for coming tonight.
Excellent, yeah.
So, guys, I think that's it for tonight, and I appreciate everybody coming out. But like I said, if you got any questions, concerns, things like that, guys, my cell phone number is 502-1534. I was about ready to give you my wife's, so I'll give you hers as well. So she'll be really happy about that. But guys, thank you so much, and it was nice to meet everybody and listen to everybody. So thank you. Have a great night, guys.